Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome. Glad you guys are all here. We've got some visitors here that really glad to see. Noemia's parents are here. My parents are here. Yeah. So got our favorite college gal over here. So it's good. Kathy. So anyway, just welcome to everybody. And of course, my grandson, which is the superstar this morning. But before we get started, I want to wish my wife a happy birthday. Yeah. All right, let's open up in prayer. Father, we once again just thank you for the opportunity to gather as believers. Lord, we love you so much, and you've blessed our lives in so many ways. God, as we open up here in communion, celebrating the supper that you established for us to remember, God, I pray that you just would help us clear our minds and just put our complete focus on you. Lord, I do lift up Andy this morning as he presents the word, that God, you just give him clarity of mind and speech, that also that our hearts will be prepared to receive the word, apply it, live it out throughout the week. Again, we love you, and we just lift up our hands in praise to you, and pray this in your son's name. Amen. So we're going to actually start off with the Lord's Supper this morning. But I want you to kind of get mentally prepared for this. One of the things that as I was kind of thinking about this week, is that I want you to think about your depravity apart from Christ. That's kind of heavy, but I think sometimes we need to periodically reflect on that. Now, once we're saved, we're saints. We're considered holy by God. Sometimes we don't live like that, but we're considered that. But it is a good thing to reflect on what we were apart from Christ, what we would be apart from him. In Romans 3:10 through 12, it says, "There is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned away. They've together become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one." As Andy knows, one of my favorite songs is "Run to the Father." And there's a part of the lyrics there that says, "You saw my condition, had a plan from the start, your son for redemption, the price for my heart." And every time we sing that little part right there, it just gets me. And it gets me right now. Nice. So anyway, so what I want us to do is, I just want to just give you a minute to contemplate on that, reflect on that, and consider really the price that God paid for you. So if we would do that just right now. Well, in 1 Corinthians 11:23 through 26, I read this out of the Amplified Bible, and I really like this version for this. And this describes the Lord's Supper. Many scholars believe that this may be the first written description of the Lord's Supper, since this letter from Paul is dated earlier than any of the other Gospels. I thought that was kind of interesting. But in verse 23, it says, "For I received from the Lord himself that instruction which I passed on to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night in which he was betrayed, took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This represents my body, which is offered as a sacrifice for you. Do this in affectionate remembrance of me.'" I like how the Amplified Version threw in the word affectionate, fondness. That's how we should go into the Lord's Supper. It's just a feeling of a full heart on what God did for us. if you feel comfortable, I know we've got several people, but I would like for you to come up if you'd like to partake of the Lord's Supper. And this is open to anybody that is a born again believer. So please come on up, and I'll share the elements. And then once you have those, just hold them. Go ahead and take the bread and the juice. And if you want to go back to your seat, that's fine. If you want to stay up here with me and we can take it together, that's great too. Whatever you feel comfortable doing. So let's pray again. Father, we thank you for the body that you sacrificed for us, broken on the cross. God, we love you for that. We can't thank you enough. All right, let's take the bread together. In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant, ratified and established in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in affectionate remembrance of me. For every time you eat this bread and drink this cup, you are symbolically proclaiming the fact of the Lord's death until he comes again." Let's pray. Father, once again, we just thank you for the shedding of your blood. And we know without that, none of us would be saved. There is no remission of sin without it. And God, we're just eternally grateful for that. Thank you for your ultimate sacrifice so that we can become your family, be sons and daughters of your kingdom. And God, we love you for that. And we pray this in your beautiful Son's name, Jesus. Amen. Let's take the cup together.
So we have been going through 1 Corinthians, and we're going to do the same thing we did last week, and that is keep what we were working on for this week, our homework for this week, to the end and talk about it. So be ready for that, and we're going to do that for the next couple of weeks, so keep thinking about that. Next week, Dave should be back. He's at a wedding now, and then Sean and Julia should be back too, I think, next week, so get everybody involved in the conversation. So last week we talked about what? Anybody remember? Lack of unity? Yep. How to split a church. Remember? Yeah. We learned all the ways to split a church. So now you can't do any of those. Okay? You've been told. So we talked about, anybody remember the ways? One of the 3 ways we talked about from last week? Argue about secondary issues. That was the first one. Very good.
Somebody's looking at their phone.
Art. That's right. Then the second one was focus on the under shepherd instead of the good shepherd. And then the third one,
Focus on man's wisdom and not God's.
right, focusing on man's wisdom and not God's wisdom. That's what Paul told us are the three big ways that brought disunity into this church in Corinth. So we're going to pick up in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18, that says, for the word of the cross is folly. And it's funny because we're going to see this word folly or foolishness several times as we go through here. And the word folly is moria, which is where we get our word moron. Okay? It's the same word. Folly is in here 3 times, and foolish is in here. And foolish means moranio, which is more another where we got the word. And then foolishness down in verse 25. So when you think about it, Paul is saying the word of the cross is moronic, is what he's saying to those who are perishing. People who are lost don't understand. But to us who are being saved, it's the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. And Paul is quoting from Isaiah there as he says that. Where is the one who's wise? Where's the scribe? Where's the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? There's the word foolish again, moron. Has God not made moronic the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly, same word, of what we preach to save those who believe. Now, I love the way, this is the ESV that we're going through this, and I like the way it translates this here because the Old King James says through the foolishness of preaching, and it's not the preaching that's foolishness. It's the message that's being preached. And that's what it's emphasizing here, that God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs, and Greeks seek wisdom. Paul is kind of contrasting the two. Remember, the Jews were all about the supernatural. They wanted to see, because they had come to think about all the miracles that the Jews had seen. So they wanted to see the supernatural signs and wonders, and the Greeks sought after wisdom. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews, and folly, same word, moronicness to the Gentiles. But to those who are called both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God, for the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For consider your calling, brothers. Not many were wise according to the worldly standards, not many were powerful, not many were of noble birth. Now, most of the time, I want to stop right there for just a second before we finish this up. Most of the time when we read these verses, people talk about how this is applied to preachers, people who are called into full-time vocation. But who's Paul writing to? Is he writing to a pastor? He's writing to the church. This is all Christians. And so many times we get confused with this kind of thing, especially as we go through the New Testament in the book of 1 Corinthians and we talk about gifts that he gives us. Many times we look at those as individual gifts, but the book was not written to individuals. There's only a couple of books in the New Testament that were written to individuals, and only 2 of them were talking to preachers, Timothy and Titus. Here we've got talking to the whole church. So he's saying, you brothers and sisters, the church, the group, the called out assembly, not many of you are wise. That's encouraging, isn't it? Hey, none of y'all are wise. According to worldly standards, not many were powerful, not many were of noble birth, but God chose what is foolishness. That's that same word, moros. God chose the moronic in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring things that are, so that no human might boast. Remember, pride was at the center of this whole thing. The pride of the people in the church. That's what brought in the division. So he's saying, you can't boast about being called of God. You can't boast about what God has given to us, your gifts, any of it has nothing to do with you. That no human being might boast in the presence of God. And because of him, you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness and sanctification and redemption. Now, I love this. I read this week about those 3 words, because those are 3 big words that Sometimes we hear in church, sometimes we don't hear in church, but a lot of times today, these are three words that are not used in most churches. Here's a simple definition. Righteousness, we're saved from the penalty of sin. Sanctification, we're being saved from the power of sin. And redemption is that we will be saved from the presence of sin. Warren Wiersbe said that, and I loved the way he put that so simply. And so I wrote that down. I thought that was really good. So, verse 31, so that as it is written, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. You know, it's interesting to see how Paul dealt with the division in the church. Because remember, this whole church is a divided church. It's got all kinds of issues and problems. Great start. Remember, the Apostle Paul started this church, stayed there for a year and a half. They had a phenomenal beginning. You can't get any better than the Apostle Paul starting your church. I mean, then Apollos, someone who was mighty in the word, stayed and served there. Even Peter had a lot to do with the spiritual formation of this church. And so Paul, coming back and dealing with division in a church that had been started so well and was doing so good, deals with this division. He talks about the unity in the body of Christ. There's one Savior and one body here in 1 Corinthians. He talks about their baptism in Christ in chapter 12, and he talks about the cross here. The cross. Everything he says here centers around that one thing. Think about crucifixion for a minute. You know, we're so used to hearing about it and seeing people wear a little gold cross around their neck. Or you drive down the street and you see a cross on a church. Or even on these simple little things like this, where we serve communion out of, there's a cross on that. The cross is everywhere today. It's a part of jewelry, it's a part of architecture, it's everywhere. But that wasn't the case back then. The cross was something that was, crucifixion was a horrible death. It was not something that was lifted up, it was something that was avoided. It was so bad that it was even illegal to crucify a Roman citizen. They weren't allowed to be crucified. I mean, it'd be kind of like us sitting down and having a nice dinner at a nice restaurant and talking about the gas chamber or the electric chair. Not normal conversations for polite society, right? But that's what they were doing. That's what was happening here in this culture. So to the rest of the world, I mean, Paul's looking at this very differently, and Paul knew that to bring this church back to the central unifier, the thing that brought everybody together, the thing that should be the center of everything that they believed, taught of Christian life, he knew he had to get them back to Jesus. He had to get them back to the cross, the gospel, the central unifier. Because like I said, to the rest of the world, the death of Christ looked like a defeat. I mean, it looked like, hey, you know what? That guy's dead now. All his followers are going to scatter. That's a done one. It happened multiple times. You can read through history about how even before Jesus came, there was ones who were lifted up. In fact, you can read some about it in the book of Acts that talked about other leaders who would come up and they would be killed and their followers would scatter. And so no doubt people were thinking, oh, Jesus is dead. That guy that claimed to be the Messiah, he's dead now. So all his followers are just going to scatter off. And this one's another of the failed attempts at creating a new religion. So it looked like a defeat. But in reality, it's the greatest victory of Christianity. That's the difference between the wisdom of the world and the wisdom of God. That's the difference. And the key word in this passage is wisdom. When we think about things, and we talked a little bit about the wisdom of God versus the wisdom of man last week. But this word wise or wisdom is used 12 times in 14 verses. So I think God's trying to get a point across to us that there's a difference, that there's something important. And Paul is contrasting the wisdom of the world to the wisdom of God. The world's wisdom. The world is always looking for a hero. I mean, look at the movies that are out now. Joe's having fun. With Marvel and DC and all the big movies now have some sort of superhero or some kind of a hero figure in all of them. But God's looking for the humble. The world wants a hero. God's looking for the humble. And that's the difference between worldly wisdom and God's wisdom. And the cross is the ultimate expression of humility. You know, people react differently when they see a cross or when you talk about a cross. And Paul points out three attitudes in this passage here in 1 Corinthians about the cross. The first one is in verse 23. Can you put that verse up for us, Gabe? Verse 23, there we go. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles. The first way that Paul says people deal with the cross, people look at the cross, the first thing that happens is some people are going to stumble at the cross. Some people, it's going to trip them up. The Jews, what did the Jews want? You remember? What was it? A sign. They wanted some kind of miraculous sign in verse 22. So, think about the miracles the Jewish nation saw. What were some of them? Crossing it, that was a huge one. Yeah. Can you imagine seeing that? They saw it. What else? Manna. Can you imagine walking out every morning and having Krispy Kremes laying at your front door? Sign me up for that one. What else did they?
Jericho walls came down.
Yeah, I wrote that one down too. Can you imagine that? Marching around a city and the walls just came tumbling down. That'd be awesome. What else? Yep. Yeah, the plagues that went through Egypt. Definitely. Uh-huh. Think about the prophets. I mean, Elijah and Elisha and the things that those guys did. I mean, the Jews saw people raised from the dead. They saw crazy things happen. So because of their history of seeing all of these signs and wonders, when Jesus comes, they're looking for a Messiah to come as a mighty conqueror who's going to do signs and miracles that's going to prove who he is. But it didn't happen. And when they look at the cross, what did they see? I mean, Jesus, they were expecting him, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, come in, conquer, wipe everybody out, set his throne up right there, and be the king. But instead, what happened? Born in a manger. He was an unemployed carpenter for a while, basically. Or that word carpenter actually means someone who works with stone. He was probably more than likely a stonemason or an architect. Did he do miracles? Yeah, he did miracles, but he did most of them off to the side. It wasn't the Billy Graham crusade where he fills Arrowhead Stadium and does all kinds of cool things, although that'd be awesome. I'd sign up for that too. And then he dies on a cross. Can you imagine how disappointed the Jews were? He's supposed to be our king, and now he's dead. So when they look at the cross, they stumbled at the weakness of the cross because they were expecting a mighty conquering Messiah to come in. And some people will still stumble at the cross today. They don't think that how can we worship a God who he was killed, he allowed that to happen. He died, he's dead. How can you worship someone like that? The cross is the sign of weakness, not the sign of strength. In a world where might is right and power equals the most important thing of influence, how can we lift up a cross? Verse 23 goes on, it says it's a stumbling block to the Jews and folly, foolishness, moronic to the Gentiles. So some people stumble at the cross, and then some people do this. Some people laugh at the cross. They kind of think it's funny. The Jews stumbled, but the Greeks laughed. Why? Because the Greeks emphasized wisdom. Think of all the Greek philosophers. Who were they? Anybody know any of them?
Plato.
Socrates. Those are the big three. There was 20 of them. Those were the only three I knew too. I Googled it. I don't remember anything from school at that time. That was a long time ago. But yeah, they emphasized wisdom. I mean, those guys were like, they were known for being great thinkers. They were all known for wisdom. Here, we've gone it's been nearly 2,500 years since those guys were alive, and we're still talking about them today. We're still studying their works today. And in fact, you can go in just about any bookstore and find their books still in print today. I was in a Barnes & Noble this week, and right up at the front, they had the Iliad and the Odyssey right there at the front. And I'm thinking, wow, how long ago was that written? And it amazes me that we're still looking at these guys and reading them and talking about them 2,500 years later. So Paul, talking about this foolishness, calls out three groups of people in verse 20. In verse 20, he looks at the wise or the expert. Then he calls out the scribe or the interpreter or the writer, and then the debater, the philosopher is what that's saying there. So he calls out to these three people talking about the foolishness of the cross, and he asks them, basically, I'm going to give you the ASV, the Andy Schelling version. And he says, basically to them, through your studies in man's wisdom, have you come to know God in a personal way? And what was the answer to that question? No. They had no idea, because man's wisdom never equals God's wisdom. The cross was foolishness to them. Again, in that culture, in that time period, might was right. The ruling, I mean, think about what was going on then. Today we have social issues. We talk about slavery a lot today. Slavery was normal then. It was not just acceptable, it was normal. Everybody did. There were conquering heroes who would go out and destroy other cities and nations and people groups. And they would come back and celebrate. Power was the most important thing that you could get. And to them, to that mindset, that cultural mindset, the cross was weakness. It was foolishness. It was the punchline to a joke. It was laughable. So some people are going to stumble at the cross because they don't think that that's how the Messiah will come. Others will laugh at the cross. And then Paul said in verse 24, but to those who are called, both Jews and Greek, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. Some people, here's the last one, some people will believe and experience the power and wisdom of the cross. Some people, it's going to make a difference in their life. Some people are going to be changed because of it. Paul didn't change his message because he was talking to a different audience. He preached Christ crucified. Verse 21 says, for then in the wisdom of God, for the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. The world might look at the cross as foolishness or folly or even laughable, but it's the power of God to salvation. It's how we come to Jesus. It's our salvation. It's how we can have eternity with God. It's for anyone who will believe it. It's available to any of us. The message of the cross is what will bring unity to a divided church. And it's what we've got to keep as the center of our church, is Jesus. What did Jesus do for us? Died on the cross to pay for our sins. That has to be the central theme of our church. Otherwise, we're going to end up in a lot bigger mess than the Corinthian church did that we're going to see as we go through here. So, the next one up there. Can you put that for me, Gabe? We talked about the last 2 weeks. What do we want our church to be? Some of you had some really great things to say last week, and it was awesome. We really got a lot. And what's going to make us different? What's going to make us different than the church that is a mile that way, half a mile that way, or a mile and a half that way? Why would someone choose to come to our church versus theirs? So that's our discussion for today. What do we want our church to be? And I'm just going to be quiet and make it really awkward till somebody else talks.
Just like you said, focus on Jesus. And as we do that, we're friendly and kind, compassionate, and all the things that he is.
That's really good. Absolutely. What else? You guys are really quiet this morning. Let me flip it and ask it this way. If in 4 or 5 years, if God keeps us, say we just stayed right in like a 500-yard radius of this building, and in 4 or 5 years, something happened and we closed the doors of the church, would the community miss us? Or would they even know that we closed the doors of the church? What do we want to do in this community? How do we want to make a difference? And that's what we're called to do, is make a difference, right? So how are we going to make a difference in this community here?
Be the light.
What's that?
Be the light.
Be the light? Okay. How? There's no wrong answers. There's no this is not a pop quiz. You're not getting graded. Nothing like that. This is open discussion. What can we do? What are the needs of this community that we could meet?
We'd almost want to contact like the chamber or the city to see, where they, surely, they can get in contact with somebody in charge of the board or whatever of the city. Maybe you can find what they see that's needed in this community.
Absolutely. I was listening to a book that I told you guys, that Church Unique book I'm listening to. That was one of the things that they said in it. I was listening to it yesterday while I was mowing the grass. So who's going to call? Does Basehor have a mayor? Yeah. So who's going to call the mayor this week and ask him how we can make a difference in this community? Or her? Him general. Him/her. I don't know. I should have looked it up. I didn't. Google.
On their site on Facebook, I don't know that I remember who the mayor is, but they do have things like they have big community deals. Tim and I talked about. I said, this is kind of stuff we need to get involved in.
Yep.
And we had talked to a friend that said, just handing out your little things from your church. No, she's like, get down and serve. Give rides to people that need to go to the restroom or need to get place because they can't walk there, or really serving, not just trying to get the name of your church out.
Absolutely.
I agree with that. I just saw on Facebook on the Piper page that people recognize and they comment about people who are doing things. Like when you said she wanted to give a shout out to a young man who stayed after the game and cleaned up around the bleachers, and people are glad that they notice things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So doing just something in the community as a group, even, and I don't know, we're gonna teach her to fake land back so we are.
So, what's that? Richard Drennan. Okay. Who's going to reach out to Richard this week?
I nominate Tim.
Yeah,
I second. All in favor? Passed unanimously.
All right.
He's a good schmoozer, man.
It's that salesman in him.
All right, I'll take that assignment.
I think that's great. So we want to know, what are the needs of this community? Some communities, if you get a little bit in more towards the city, drug addiction's a big thing. Homelessness. There are community issues. So what would be a community issue? Anybody have any idea what a community issue would be here in this community in Basehor?
Foster families.
Foster?
Foster.
Because there's what's the name of the?
Joy Meadows.
Yeah, Joy Meadows is here.
It's based on Basehor.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think their home is in Because we're actually doing a care community where you wrap yourself around a family and you just do small needs, just meals, cutting grass, watching
Yeah.
kids while they get some rest.
And
Yep.
single parent ministries are another really good one.
Mhm.
Good things, elderly and disabled, right?
There's a lot of elderly in this community. Right across the street, there's a community.
There's a couple communities, there's one right over here.
Yeah.
The
Good.
VFW might have veterans that,
It's a great idea. We're in their building. We might as well help them too. I mean, yeah.
And the veteran population.
Mhm.
They struggle.
They have a large population here.
Addiction, like all of that is
Yeah.
It just helps them feel safe and secure back in the civilian world.
Mhm.
They don't always do that.
Absolutely. Why are people moving to this community? This community is growing. Why are they moving here?
Because it's pretty.
It's pretty. It
It
is.
Lower
It
taxes.
used to be lower taxes and you could get more bang for your buck out here, but now
To me, it's quiet.
Quiet?
That's what I take it as, it's more of a quiet, because when you've been in the city and you hear the noise and all that
Mhm.
stuff all the time, like it's peak, every time you turn around, we're hearing noise.
Yeah.
Good and bad, you know what I mean?
It's a safe community.
Yes.
It is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Except for the, I mean, it's a little too aggressive on the speeding. Like, if you go over there and give you a ticket, so you need to stop, you need to slow that down. That would be a community service we offer, and go there, Tim, and mention that. Hey,
When Gary is riding his slingshot down the road.
1 mile, I literally had a guy pull me over, a police officer. He didn't pull me over, he followed me, and he's like, actually, you didn't do anything wrong, I just want to check out your slingshot.
I got pulled over in Gatlinburg, Tennessee for doing 1 mile over the speed limit.
Nice.
They used to get you for even 4 or 5 miles out here.
It used to be 20.
But the
Wow.
mayor, they got in trouble, cops out here got in trouble for pulling people over.
Oh, I got 2 in the same day that day.
Oh.
That was a rough day. The other one, I was really speeding. I was really speeding on the other one.
How much is a ticket for 1 mile over?
I don't remember. That was a long time ago.
There's no difference.
There's the guy to ask right there.
Yes, sir. 1 mile, 1 to 10 miles
Oh,
over
1
the
to
speed
10.
limit, there's no difference. And then after that, it's every 5 miles.
If you're gonna do 1, you might as well do 10 and just get your money's worth.
That's what it's at.
That's what it's at.
I've always thrown out my daughter's name. Now we can throw out Ernesto.
That's right. Major, because he was promoted this week. He is now major. His wife now calls him Major Payne. But when I think about out here, one of the things that I see is this huge school, and that's why I think a lot of young families are moving out here. So how do we reach young families?
We should probably be present in their events that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Football games.
Schools, maybe the schools, supporting kids in schools, supplies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had a small group years ago, and one of the attendees at our group taught in a school,
Mm-hmm.
and it was an inner city school, and a lot of those kids didn't have coats for the winter, and so we took a collection, bought a bunch of coats for the the kids in the class.
Mm-hmm.
That's something very tangible. Actually, gifted it to them. If there's something like that we could do, that would be great.
Yeah,
The principal probably would know.
Yeah.
we did that in Piper. Was it 2 years ago? I think we partnered with them and did their schools.
Well, I got to point out, Amanda said she used the word "wrap yourself around the family." That's pretty. I like that phrase. So yeah, if we could,
That's a little too personal for you.
whatever.
I don't want you wrapping anything around me.
I'm gonna wrap myself around you after the service. Around your neck.
Major, 911.
But identify some, a family or 2 or 3 or whatever in one of the schools and do that. That would be fantastic.
You
Yeah.
also create events for the younger families
Mhm.
in the area. For them to actually
Absolutely.
wanna come to.
Absolutely.
Like, I think,
And we can also see, everybody that lives out here, just because they're moving out here doesn't mean that they're on the same financial status.
Mhm.
There might be people that need help with their kids' lunches or anything like that, you might be able to help with clothing or, just
Yeah.
kind of a little benevolence fund for kids and, helping families, people with lots of kids or foster kids.
Yeah. You can always tell what's important to a church by where the money goes. And I've rarely seen a church that the money that came in, they turned around and sent it back out into the community to make a difference. Most, it's all about what we can get with a nicer building, nicer this, better that, more programs for the people who are here. How can we entertain the saints more than make a difference? When I think about it, man, if in 5 years we closed the doors, I would want this city to be hurting and be like, man, what happened? Those people were like That's what Christians should be like.
We have a good friend that she does my hair. Her salon's at her home. It's just over here on the road, like about a mile.
Can she help me?
But she's she's a Christian and everything, and so it's kind of funny because speaking of kids and stuff, she just has a really a gift with kids. She used to teach Sunday school and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But all the neighborhood kids love her to death. Like she's got kids coming in out of her salon. We were sitting there, I was cracking up. She has a candy jar, and she started it with that. And she has this candy jar, and these kids, these neighborhood kids, you know, they all come to see JoJo, and they get their candy, and then she gives them chalk to draw on her driveway, and they're out there. And I mean, you come over there, and there's like 4 or 5 little girls down there, you know. She lets them come in and play with their Barbie doll. That to me is just, and the mom, she'll text the mom, your daughter's here, you know, just to let them know. But she was telling me a story, like she hears stories of what's going on with these kids, and you know, some of them, there's one family that they're all foster kids, and I mean, it's just interesting, you know, and she just hears that because she opens up her place to let these kids come and just hang out and talk to her. And she finds out what their needs are, and she just, I don't know, it's kind of a little safe place for them to come to.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I don't think Basehor has, along with other places, has a community center, a
No,
safe
they don't.
place. You know, it's obviously going to be age appropriate,
Mm-hmm.
but like there's no place like this that they can just come out and just be kids or be teens or have, you know, everybody bring frozen pizzas and hang out on Friday night. You know, they're probably driving around maybe or thinking about doing something. You know, I don't think there's any place around here that just says, hey, once a month, kids can just come and let's hang out and, you know, be kids, and if you want to talk to somebody, you talk, or play music or play guitar, you know, or just
Yeah.
be kids. You know, and I don't know what that would be. But just to get kids involved.
Yeah.
hang out,
Family,
sing.
they can make it their parents.
Yeah.
And if their mom and dad knows they're going to be here, you know, they don't have to worry for whatever.
Right.
Friday night or Saturday night or Thursday night or whatever.
Yeah. That'd be awesome. I love dreaming big
Has that.
like that. This is good.
Another way that you can build rapport is, well, I don't know with COVID how much they allow this, but in Topeka, we would go into the schools, like they have different programs where, you know, we go into the schools and like do like a mentor program.
A lot of schools do. Yeah. I don't know if they do that here.
Help, you know, help with
Mm-hmm.
whatever the class was in need of for the kids and the students or whatever. That built a rapport.
Yep.
And then when I was the youth director in my old church, we did exactly what Rudy was talking about, and even what Gary was talking about. Like he would find a park or a shelter home or something like that, and we would do different, you know, activities and events, and then we would be able to incorporate just different lessons from the Bible.
Yeah.
It was a fun activity day, and we were feeding them and, you know, things like that. So I think those are all great
Yeah, that's great.
ideas, all ways to like build rapport with the community.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna start in the school, then we would be able to like get to know the kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
personally, if we don't live out here.
Absolutely. That's good.
It's not just here, they're around, just down that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a really nice park, and it's got like hot dog night or
Just annual. Annual.
it's a nice little park, and a lot of people get to.
When we were in South Carolina, there was a church that adopted our subdivision, and they came out and did that. Played music, grilled hamburgers, hot dogs, and just had a place to hang out. And it was just a gift to the subdivision.
They do want to think about that for like a little fall thing. You know, fall's coming. It'd be kind of fun to do, like to see, you know, Tim when you talk to the mayor tomorrow.
It's Labor Day.
You're not gonna be on a boat.
Maybe see what the
You'll have your cell phone with you.
like what the options for renting that park is, or you know, or using that park. I don't know how much that, but I don't think you have to rent it. Probably just sign up like you do.
Sure.
And then maybe do a little community outreach.
I love it.
And have, you know, maybe have a nice sign made up, it's a big church,
Of the
hot dogs and.
Good
Yeah.
church in the
tacos.
Yeah.
Sam's Club has walkie talkie bags now. You can make.
Do they really?
Chili. That'd be fun.
I'm all for. I think it's I want this community to know we're
We
here.
gotta know who we are.
Yeah.
Right now, everybody knows.
Putting a sign out in front even is not a great. I mean, people will see it, but they'll drive right by it. It's just another church.
Cars here every week and think, what's going on there? But they don't really know what's going on. We can let them know.
Yeah, I think it's better. I mean, I be careful how I say this, but I think it's better for us to invest. You know, when we are giving,
Yes.
to turn it back around into the community rather than to pay full-time staff to be here to work all week. That's a little radical, but I really think that that would make a bigger difference in this community than having somebody sitting in an office all week long here. Absolutely.
I ran like a campus ministry council on my college, and we did a survey and said, okay, what do people notice about the church most? And what they said is
Mhm.
intentionality, like be intentional with serving others. And so I just love a lot of ideas. It just made me think of that because we just did a survey about it, especially young adults, what they notice and what a community notices when
Mhm.
you're intentional. So,
Absolutely. You know, my generation wanted the big church with tons of stuff going on and to stay more anonymous. But 2 generations down now, the early 20s, they're looking for smaller, more intentional is a great word, but someplace they can make a difference. That's why you see so many social issues popping up in churches, because they want to adopt something that makes a difference. And I think the social issue that we tackle needs to be one of our community. What's going on here? How can we make a difference here? Because this is where God's put us. So what can we do? And that's our project for next week too. We're going to keep talking like this. Look around hey, Google it. Drive around Basehor. There's an event coming up. Does anybody know what it is here in the community? Yeah, it's a car show coming up. I mean, when is it? Yeah, it's coming quick. And it may not be enough time now, but what if we had just a booth there where we grilled hamburgers and hot dogs and gave them to everybody who came by? How cool would that be? You know, how much does it cost? Nothing. We just wanted to give you something. We're just here to serve our community.
I think it's Gideon that does it for the Piper, but they do like tailgating for the games.
5th quarter.
Yeah.
Morgan went to it Friday night. It's after the football game is over. They provide a safe place for all the kids. It's right across the street, just about from the school. They grill out. They have music and games going, and they can stay for a couple of hours. It's a safe place where parents don't have to worry about their kids.
Do they allow volunteers?
What's that?
Do they allow volunteers?
Cody, I'm sure Cody would. Cody, actually, I saw him last week, and he said at his church in California they used to do baby showers for churches. So he told me, he said, make a list. We want to throw a baby shower for Faithway. So they want to help us.
Well, we need a speaker for now. We need his keyboard so we can start playing again.
He's looking. I talked to him last week. I'm gonna reach out to him again, and I think we're only limited by our creativity and how we can make a difference here. But I don't want us to be like, you know, I don't know if you've watched the age of people who attend church, but it's gone up. And I don't want us to be a church that breeds itself out because we die off. You know, we need to be reaching young families and making a difference here.
But we need to be careful though.
I agree. I agree.
At our last church, what we also did in our youth group is we did like a lock-in night
Mm-hmm.
where it was like a back to school.
Yeah.
Well, we would either do it at the end of school or the back
Mhm.
to school, depending on, time and things like that. But we did that once a year.
Yeah, absolutely.
We would, if it was a back to school, we would do like backpacks or
Mhm.
put up the school supplies and stuff in it or whatever.
Yeah.
If it was the end of the year school type thing where we did like a celebration.
Mhm.
Different stuff.
Definitely. You only
awards
say that
or
'cause you're old
whatever.
now.
So, and we would always recognize like kids who were in,
Mm-hmm.
honor roll, or like Ms. Mona said, like their different things, like if they were sports, if they were into music.
Yeah,
whatever,
absolutely.
Like we would post their,
It's good.
their
Mhm.
events, and then at the end of the year, we would give out our own rewards. The Second Baptist was really big at knowing that we needed to reward our young people
Mhm.
ourselves and not let they look to the world for
Yeah,
that,
good.
validation or whatever, so that
Very
might
good.
be something as well.
To finish up, I wanted to give you an update. We had the assessment this week. Remember I told you about that big assessment? So I took 2 days off work, and Noemi and I went through a pretty intensive questionnaire kind of a thing. It was at at New City, our sending church. So we'll get the results back from that in 2 weeks. But I heard Matt said it went well. There was quite a few church planters that were there. And the purpose of that is funding for the church. So they'll help us with different things. There's also some support things that go along with that. They help with missions too. There's a lot of really neat stuff that's coming because of that. So I'll give more information as we get closer, but that was like a 2-day intensive. And then last week I had my first infusion I told you guys I was going to have to do. It turned out it was a much larger one than what they were thinking, so I had to be there for 2.5 hours for the initial, instead of an hour, and then a half hour afterwards. So this week is Tuesday. What do I have Tuesday? Colonoscopy and endoscopy, that's what it is. And then Thursday, another infusion. And then the following Tuesday, another infusion of iron. So they're trying to figure out, hopefully we'll get some answers. And so anyways, just wanted to give you an update on those 2 things.
Do you feel better after the infusion?
They told me it'd be a few weeks before I felt any different. I'm still, I get up in the morning, I can go right back to sleep and sleep all day. So it's just energy is all, the only way I know it is energy. When I walked in, the appointment Tuesday, it was at the cancer center. It was a little surreal to walk in and see cancer on the side of the building. I'm like, oh, wow. So I went in and met the doctor. It was supposed to be a consult, and he was going to start scheduling things, but I walked in and he said, there's a number that I look at in your labs. It should have been 100 and yours was 0. So I went ahead and called your doctor and called your insurance, and we're starting your infusion today. So they just went ahead and jumped right into it to get the ball going on it and stuff. So he said it'll take a few weeks. I'll start feeling, that's the only thing I feel is just tired. I can't tell any other difference.
What is it?
Really low iron, and they don't know why. If I'm losing blood, that's why the tests are Tuesday, or it could be an autoimmune deficiency or something like that, or it even could be cancer. So they don't know what it is. I'm not worried. My life insurance is paid. My wife will be happy no matter what.
Hey, I wanted to tell the group that one of the assessors,
Oh yeah.
I know him really well. He sat at the table with Andy and Noemia, and I knew that he was there, so I texted him because I wanted to know how it was going. And you know what? He had just met him and spent the day with them, and he called them Kingdom Gems. He said, those 2 are Kingdom Gems. And I thought, there you go. That's my Andy and Noemia. So anyway,
He's a
we're
nice
really
guy.
proud of them.
Well, most of these people would know, right? Marty?
Yeah. Oh, Marty Birch.
Yeah, it was Marty Birch.
Oh.
Did you? When he was that assessment, yeah, they had us meet, and there was like hour blocks, and they focused on like different things. So Marty was spiritual and emotional health, and he just asked a ton of questions and talked. One was family and marriage, and it was a counselor. Noemi failed that one. Just kidding. You'll wrap your hands around me, or your arms, whatever you said. Totally. No, some of it was just all kinds of areas like that that they assessed. You even had to teach in a room with like 3 people in it. So they assessed you on that kind of stuff.
Anything interested in that, she failed that one.
Oh, yeah.
Preaching, she failed the preaching one too. Yeah. Local football allegiance was one of them. Yes, when they found out she liked she doesn't like a team, she just likes Tom Brady. Yeah, unfortunately. Well, let's pray. We'll close out. Bill, you closing us?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for the word, Andy. It's good. It's good to be back. Been gone 3 weeks, so good to see everybody again. first week I was at my dad's 90th birthday party. Just give you a little update. He had 110 people there, and like 8 preachers there, and then he preached a message.
Of course.
And we only did 2 stanzas of "Just As I Am."
The slow day.
Yeah, that was the first week, and then last couple of Sundays been gone on a motorcycle trip, and 5 of us went. And maybe we can reach out to this community through motorcycles too. Who knows? I mean, we have a little group that meets through the week on a Saturday or Friday night, and if we get somebody from out here too, that'd be great. So who knows what the Lord will do with that? But we had a great time. Last couple of weeks, 10 days we was gone. Some of the guys only made it 7 days, I think.
7.5.
Yeah. And two of us young guys, we went on the full trip. I think they did 2,500 miles. We did 3,500. So we had a great time. And the highlight of the trip for me was sharing my faith. I got to do that 2 times. So that was good, just to be able to do that. One of the places was the Navajo tribe. Sorry, Pam and Judy. They were set up on this side of the road. A couple places they set up different places, and they'd have booths and stuff selling Indian jewelry. I got me another copper bracelet, and this lady. She was a Navajo, and she was. I talked to her. I said, I just asked her something. I don't remember what it was. Are you Christian, And she goes, no, my faith is in the Navajo tribe and just Native American and all that, And she goes, but I'm open to everything. And so I said, have you ever read the Bible? And she goes, no, I really never have, but I'm open to it, And so I said, well, start at the book of John, and read it sometime, And so she said she would, and so that was kind of a little seed that I planted. And then later on, me and Dave was at the north rim of the Grand Canyon, and we were staying at a lodge with a cabin. And the girl at the desk, she had an accent from Texas, and so I started talking to her a little bit, and her dad had built part of the buildings at that lodge when she was a kid, and so she grew up sounded like in a terrible home life, and she didn't have anything to do with her sisters, or her dad had died, her mom she didn't know where, and her and her husband had gone back out there to work at this lodge location, for the summer. And she didn't even know where they was going to go in November, where they was going to go and live or anything, And so I just thought, I asked her bluntly, I said, are you a Christian? And she goes, no. She goes, we was brought up religious in our family. Texas is just covered with religion, all the churches on every other block and everything. And she goes, and there's a big religious group around this place too, around the Grand Canyon area, which I thought, well, but I didn't know. I said, well, religion isn't what it's all about. It's about your faith and knowing the Lord. I said, because this life is just temporary, And so I was able to share a little bit with her, and I could just see her hardened heart, And I asked her if she had any kids, and she said, no, I'll never have any kids. I got my cats, and that's all I need, Never met her husband, but he worked there too. And she's about in her early 30s, And so later, we was getting ready to pack up, and I was getting stuff on my bike the next morning, and I had one of these little New Testaments in my bike that I'd picked up from like a biker's rally or something like that. Jody gave me one time, and it might have been that one that I give away, Jody, so get me another one sometime. But, so I thought, usually when I'm on my trips, I just read my phone, the Bible on my phone and stuff like that. And so I thought, I could give that to that girl and, maybe make a difference. So took it up to her and gave it to her. And I thought, she's probably going to reject this. But she was real receptive to it. And she said that she would read it. And so, just planting seeds. And So that was the highlight of the motorcycle trip for me. Yeah, so, and we on our bikes on the trip too. Just to let you know, we have a devotion time, don't we, Tim? And Tim shared one night, and I shared one night, and we just kind of make it kind of like a guys' time, you know, where we can come together and charge each other up and build each other up in the faith too. So it's a good thing. So, all right, let's pray. It's good to be back, everybody. Okay, Father, just thank you for this church, Lord. Lord, we don't even know why you brought us to this community, Lord, but we know that you brought us here to make a difference, Lord. And so just help us to be that light and find ways to make a difference in this community, Lord, to spread your word and tell people about Jesus, Lord, and so that when they see Faith Way and they come to know who we are and where we are, Lord, that they will know that we love you, Lord, is the main thing. Just help us to meet that challenge, Lord. Show us different ways. Bless us this week as we go our separate ways. People got plans for tomorrow, probably, Lord. Keep us all safe, I pray. Watch over Andy and help him, the doctors, Lord, to find out what's going on in his life and others that are having problems too, Lord. I know Kathy mentioned Steve, Lord, how that he's got cancer right now. I just want to lift him up to you. And everybody that just needs something in their life, Lord, just hear our prayers. Ask these things, Father. In Jesus' name, amen. Tim, you got me started.
Yeah.